radio and listen to a classic rock song, and when the acoustic guitar comes on, there's this ugly hiss underneath of it. And you think to yourself, this is a classic song. It shouldn't be sounding like this. And you know that it's different from the record. You know it's not what it sounds like it should be. That's probably because somebody has compressed it over the radio. Hi, my name is Arden Bank, and I'm going to tell you about audio compression today and how throughout the years it's been getting more and more harsh, making things louder. And I'm going to tell you what compression is, first of all, and then I'm going to go through how we use it today in recording aspect, and then finally how it's made things get louder and louder. It's almost a little bit unpleasant to our ears. Compression is basically limiting the dynamic range of music. And what that basically means is we make things all sound the same. As engineers, we want to put out the best product we can. And so you don't want the listener turning their dials every few seconds just because they want to turn the volume up. So we make all the soft things a little bit louder than they should be, and everything that's loud is sort of at the same volume, so that we sort of squish it all together and get a nice mesh of sound. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if everything's at the same volume, again, it just sort of glues it all together. It doesn't keep it in a strange sort of things are really, really soft and things are really loud. And basically, what we do is, as engineers, we work with squigglies. That's a waveform. It's a visual representation of audio. You can see the smaller part is where things are softer, and the louder parts are obviously the bigger ones. Well, what compression basically does is we don't want this huge cross between the two parts, so in our line of work, we compress it, leave the larger parts as they are, and just bring out the smaller ones. That's what compression does. It's really simple. It's just a way to keep the volume the same. And the way we use this today, because before, when we were using analog systems, it wasn't such a big deal. But we have limits now that we've moved on to digital recording. And while we're in the digital age, we have to be more careful with how we compress things. We have a limit to how much we can store in audio. When we record, we have a certain bit rate that we follow. And that's basically all it is we only have so many zeros that we can turn into ones in the binary code. Computers work with zeros and ones, and we only have so many zeros we can use. So when all of the zeros become ones, that's the highest volume we could possibly have. And when you record something that's louder than all of the ones, you're doing something called clipping. If I go back to the squiggly, we have lines. Those lines represent our limits in what we can record. If we go above them in volume, we start to do something called clipping, which is where we actually distort the audio that we have because we round down to the nearest volume. And that destroys the signal that we have. It's a little barrier that we have in compression. So what we use this for is when we compress it, we make sure that it doesn't go above this volume threshold. We make sure that it doesn't distort in sound and everything is as loud as it can be within the confines that we have. Now, this can sometimes turn into a bad thing. When you're listening to something on the radio, they do have to compress it because everyone doesn't have the same radio system. It's always going to be at a different volume. This is the original Stairway to Heaven. And as you're listening to it, sorry, I should turn that up. It sounds nice, but this isn't how you would hear it on the radio. what you would hear on the radio is this. You can hear it's a lot louder. I didn't do anything to turn up the volume really. But if the speakers were a little bit better, you would hear a large hiss underneath it. That's because it's bringing up everything that's soft in the recording. We've compressed it so that all the soft parts are louder than they would naturally be. And that sometimes destroys the sound. Now, the reason we're now doing this, as opposed to back in the 70s when that song was originally recorded, is because there's something called the loudness wars. In our more modern times, we've started to make everything louder and louder, just because things that are louder sell better. It's been proven. They've done research studies, and records that are louder, they make more money. So to do this, we compress things so that we can have them be as loud as possible on a CD. And classic songs aren't as loud. So when they play both of them on the radio, you have to compensate. You have to make your older songs louder. And they do that through compression. In fact, it's been so drastic that within 15 years, it's gone up by about 6 decibel points. And a decibel is just the measurement of sound. And that doesn't seem like a lot just because it's 6, but it's quite a bit in the audio world. It goes up logarithmically, and it's quite a hefty thing. And when things are so loud like that, you absolutely can't stay within the confines of what we've set for ourselves. Here's a song which has been so compressed recently that you can hear distortion. I'll turn it down a little. Sorry for anybody who doesn't like rock. If you listen carefully to that, most people don't really notice it, and it's not that big of a deal, but there is this little crackling noise that happens whenever something sounds in that song, and that's clipping. That's when we've gone so loud past the threshold that we've set that things start to sound ugly like that. And actually, that's what we call brick walling, when it's so loud that the signal goes from something like that, this is a waveform of that song before it was mixed, to that. It's quite a drastic change. And we call it brick walling because there's that imaginary line that is our threshold. You can see how things are pushed up against it, and it looks like a square rather than a natural waveform, which is our curve. This is actually really bad because it can be damaging to your ear. When you have a constant sound that's that loud, your hair cells will actually start dying out quicker than they usually do. So, just to recap, compression, while it can be a good thing, has gone drastically up throughout the ages. And in more recent times, it's been getting so loud that it is harmful to us. It just doesn't make stuff sound good. Thanks.